I will try not to use egregious profanity this time in the introduction, since I'm on the record. I've known Howard for a while. He was in the old Brentwood Toastmasters, and unlike the prodigal son, he left for Las Vegas, but he's come back to us, at least virtually from Las Vegas. He's a distinguished Toastmaster. His job, which took him to Las Vegas, is he's a senior paralegal and co-trustee of Charles Arthur Enterprises. That organization offers advice to estates and trusts on avoiding taxes. Everyone's going to groan because they associate it with really dry material like I come up with. You know, the number has changed from 6,000 to 6,200 to 6,400, and people fall asleep. Not so with Howard. Howard has talked about people who landed a boat, a big boat, on an atoll somewhere, a reef, to make their own country. They were going to make pharmaceuticals there until the country nearby, who actually owned the atoll, found them and seized them. Another interesting speech was a plan to have an old California. We don't really see anything around which represents the history of California. Back east, they've got Williamsburg. Here, what we got is Olvera Street, which is pretty much souvenirs, good food, but souvenirs. And the last thing is, which I thought was ridiculous, he was going to repurpose airplanes, fuselages, airplane bodies into boats. And that was absurd, except I read in somewhere I was looking at pictures of people who do that, at least with large airplane fuel tanks. They turn them into zippy little boats. That's in Vietnam. He always has something, and he's interested in enterprises, because I guess he can offer them tax advice, but he comes up with the most interesting enterprises. He's going to tonight practice a speech he may give at a trade show, and it's meant as sort of a tribute. It's titled Brilliant Light Power, and it talks about the work of Dr. Randall Miller. So Brilliant Light Power and the work of Dr. Randolph Miller by Howard. It's going to be 15 minutes long, and the timer will start at 13 and flash the yellow at 14. Dr. Howard, take it.
Breakthrough Energy is a long-time passion of mine. Presiding officers, ladies and gentlemen, I've been interested in this field since about 2012. Eventually, I found what is the leading website in the field. It's called e-catworld, e-catworld.com, a gentleman named Frank Acklin, who is far from egregious. In fact, he seems like a fine gentleman. It seems to cover all the fields of breakthrough energy. In this talk, I shall focus on one contender. It's called Brilliant Light Power. This is an expansion, revision of an update of prior talks on the subject, including a visual aid. Your Easter eggs before the toast. The little Easter egg is A. Your next car or the one after that may be a steam car, not a battery one. And the most important takeaway from this talk, energy is going to become far less expensive, far cleaner, and far more abundant in the next few years. Here are the 4 threads that lead to this conclusion. Thread number 1, the use of hydrinos to produce superheated steam. That's the first thread. The second thread, the use of hydrinos in modern automobiles, the use of superheated steam, not necessarily from hydrinos, to produce a modern 1925 automobile, an example of which was built for a man whose name you all know, Howard Hughes. The third thread is the use of high temperature steam, superheated steam, to produce an Indianapolis 500 race car commissioned by another man whose name you know, Bill Lear of Motorola, 8-track, and Learjet fame. And the fourth thread, suggested by an evaluator of previous versions of this talk, is what about the safety aspects consideration of superheated steam? Let's take those in order. All 4 threads leading to the 2 conclusions and the tribute, the toast to the men and women of Brilliant Light Power. The first thread, the hydrino used to produce superheated steam. Hydrino are used in a sun cell, both registered trademark of the company, to produce work in an engineering sense. The man behind this is a man named Randall Mills, and he does this at Brilliant Light Power, located at 417 Old Trenton Road, Cranbury, New Jersey. That's in the Trenton-Princeton area of central New Jersey, about an hour by train out of New York City. Dr. Randall Mills has an MD from Harvard about 1986, has taken undergraduate degrees in engineering from William & Mary, and he's further taken engineering courses at MIT. In other words, he's an upstanding fellow, not an egregious fellow. Available to you at no charge at the company website is the following: an 1,873-page book, including annotations, footnotes, references, diagrams, all to describe his theory. I've looked at the book to verify, yes, it's all 1,873 pages, and there's further papers, talks, etc., all available on the firm website there from central New Jersey, about an hour and a half, or hour and a quarter by train out of Philadelphia, right there in central New Jersey. I will give you the theory in a nutshell. There exist these hydrinos, can be used in the sun cell. They are produced through a chemical reaction. They go to a lower ground state of the hydrogen atom where energy is released. And further, this is the cosmological implication. These hydrinos, or rather, to say it in a better way, dark matter in this universe is composed of hydrinos. It would be probably useful to have a degree in chemistry or engineering or physics to fully understand it. However, that's the theory in a nutshell. Here are the specific achievements of this firm as we move from the summer to the autumn to the fall in the Northern Hemisphere of the year 2020. The firm and its predecessor firms have raised in the last 22 years some $100 to $120 million in venture capital, which is impressive. Further, they are claiming that they can achieve 10 times over unity through this chemical reaction. In other words, they put 1 unit of energy in and they get 10 back, which is, again, is remarkable. And more applicable to our specific discussion of your next automobile or the one after that is the idea of they can produce superheated steam at between 100 to 800 degrees centigrade, and they can keep the process going for 100 hours. They're currently running 5 separate sun cells, again, registered with the company, using the hydrinos on their premises as a demonstration. The logical step would be then field trials and then commercialization. Look for this happen in 2 to 10 years. It is coming, mark my words. They specifically identify on their website this will allow use of a George Brayton cycle turbine. The George Brayton cycle turbine is one of many types of turbines. If you look on Wikipedia for a fellow named George Selden, who was an early automobile pioneer, it's him at the wheel of one of the George Brayton cycle or turbine cars about 1905. I might do several talks about the patent fights of the late 19th and early 20th century, including the one between George Selden and a group led by Henry Ford I, another man who you heard of. And that's the end of the first thread. In other words, it's possible to use these hydrinos in the sun cell to get superheated steam. The second thread, the modern use of superheated steam in automobiles. The Brayton cycle turbine is one of many types of turbines. If there were more time, I would cover their history going back to Hero of Alexandria in the 1st century of the Common Era. In fact, the many types of turbines are possible, including the George Brayton cycle turbine, and Nikola Tesla himself invented a bladeless turbine, which deserves a whole talk in itself. Let's focus right to automobiles and talk about the pinnacle of the first incarnation steam car. That's about 60 cars made by the Doble brothers between about 1919 and the early 1930s. The brightest of the Doble brothers was Abner Doble. And after the car production ended, he even made a steam-powered aircraft about 1935 in Oakland, California. And yes, it flew. It was not an egregious craft. It actually flew. The key 2 factors that differentiate a Doble brothers steam car from all of the steam cars, and they actually kept the same serial numbers, even though they changed company names, was they have superheated steam and electric starter. I will focus on one example. It's number 20. It's a roadster built about 1925 for a man whose name you know, Howard Hughes. It's currently in the automotive collection of another man whose name you know, Jay Leno. As you may or may not know, Jay Leno has one of the largest automobile collections in private hands. This particular example, again a Roadster, has the torque of a modern turbo diesel engine. It has 1,000 pound-feet of torque. Like electric cars, steam cars have lots of torque and both are quiet. This particular example has direct drive and no transmission. In other words, here is the engine, has a straight drive shaft, and then the driving wheels at the rear. Again, electric cars, steam cars, they're both quiet and lots of torque. This particular example, which does not use high tensile steel in its chassis in any place, it has no aerodynamics, no streamlining whatsoever. It's egregious in that fashion. Will do about 0 to 75 in 10 seconds. Jay Leno does have a steam car wing in his vehicle collection, including a Stanley steamer. And you can see Jay Leno on the road with these and other cars, including what I believe the 3 Chrysler Turbine cars from the mid-1960s in private hands. That's in the second thread. In other words, it's possible to make a reasonable automobile, and it was in the 1925 and through 1919 to early 1930s using superheated steam. The third thread, high-speed superheated steam cars. In the late 1960s or the 1970s, there was a burgeoning environmental movement. Quite frankly, it's one of the 2 groups competing to enslave you. That's a whole other talk in itself. However, the question was asked in the late 1960s or 1970s, will there be internal combustion engine ICE transportation, not immigration custom force, but ICE transportation? Along comes General Motors, GM, and they said, can we take a much more streamlined aerodynamic body, think a Chevrolet Corvette, a Pontiac Firebird, a Chevrolet Camaro, or a Pontiac GTO? Can we take that body? Can we take a modern chassis which uses high tensile steel? That's sort of the sub thread of this, is there's actually the importance of high tensile stainless steel. And can we run a Doble Brothers drivetrain? The patents having long expired. The answer was yes, and they made a prototype about 1969 to be prepared in case ICE was banned. Also about this time, GM even bought a license for the Wankel rotary engine, which Mazda is putting back into production as a range extender for electric vehicles. Full disclosure, I happen to like Mazda RX-8s. This one's in burgundy. There's the Wankel rotary engine in it. And quite frankly, I'd like one in blue with a light interior and a manual transmission, full disclosure. But also about this time, 1967, 1968, you have the famed STP turbine cars in Indianapolis. The man behind that was late Andy Granatelli. They were primarily driven by Parnelli Jones, who right now is the oldest known living Indianapolis 500 driver. That's for a whole series that's called CART, now called IndyCar, and owned by Roger Penske. Although the Indianapolis 500 is the crown jewel, there's actually 2 street races. There's usually a street race where they block off the streets of Long Beach in mid-April, and there's also usually every year another street race at what's called Surfers Paradise, Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. Inspired by the Chrysler turbine car, or actually the STP turbine car, Chrysler also made turbine cars for many years, comes along a man whose name you know, William Bill Lear, one of the co-founders of Motorola, also A-Track and the Learjet. He said, I will make steam cars, and to publicize them, I will join Roger Penske and run at the Indianapolis 500. And he actually built one. He made a steam car that can go over 200 miles an hour, do it for 500 miles, and do it with acceptable fuel and coolant use. Bill Lear called his coolant Lyrium. It may well have been Freon. This automobile is now in a private automobile collection in the Chicago, Illinois area, and there are YouTube videos of it that are available. You can look them at Frank Ackland's e-catworld.com. And if you wish to travel faster, simply obtain a Bugatti Chiron for millions of dollars. That's the end of the third. In other words, it's possible to make a high-speed automobile using superheated steam. Indeed, it was done under the guidance of William Bill Lear of Learjet fame. The fourth thread, So safety aspects consideration of superheated steam. Any extraction of energy has risks, or release for that matter. You might go to a wood pile to fetch wood and a rattlesnake bites you. Does it happen? Yes. That is why you wear gloves, long sleeve shirts, long thick jeans, and boots. When I first gave this talk, the question was, what about safety? The answer is very simply. With modern stainless steel construction using high tensile steel, proper welding techniques, and pressure relief valves, this is a minor issue. The Hartford Steam Boiler Inspection and Insurance Company, which is now part of Munich Re, a large European reinsurance company, led this progress. If you put all four threads together, the Overunity Hydrino of Randy Mills and his team, the superheated steam, the patents of the Doble brothers, primarily Abner Doble, that uses superheated steam, the steam race car of Bill Lear that uses superheated steam, and modern safety procedures and rigorous safety procedures that use for modern boiler construction, primarily high tensile stainless steel, to safely use superheated steam. Here is your big takeaway. Energy is going to become far less expensive, far cleaner, and far more abundant in the next few years. A smaller takeaway, your next car or the one after that may be a steam car and not a battery one. And ladies and gentlemen, presiding officer, a toast to the success of the team at Brilliant Light Power.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Howard. Again, totally different than taxes. They're something very surprising to me.